Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 13. Today, we're heading behind the scenes of Drury Outdoors, Mark and Terry Drury's mega successful outdoor TV and video production company. And joining us is Matt Drury, the brand manager for Drury Outdoors, to discuss how his dad and uncle have become such accomplished hunters and what it takes to produce some of the world's greatest hunting videos. I think you guys are really going to like this one, so relax and enjoy. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. Here with me, as always, is my nine-fingered brother from another mother, Dan Johnson. And with us today also is a very special guest, Matt Drury. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to chat whitetails with you and chat about Drury Outdoors and everything. And as we mentioned in the show intro, you're the brand manager for Drury Outdoors and also the son of Terry Drury. And over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, we were hoping to dive deep into what it was like growing up in that family, surrounded by successful whitetail hunters, and then also what it takes to create successful hunting videos and TV. But first, here on the Wired Hunt podcast, we like to kick things off with a curveball. And so I'm going to have to ask my sidekick, Dan, to step up to the mound and fire away with his crazy question of the day.
Okay, Matt.
All right.
Matt, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so all three of us have spent a lot of time in a tree stand over a season, and sometimes nature calls. Okay? Now, are you a get down out of the tree stand type of person, or pee in a bottle, or let her fly from the tree stand?
Where do you come up with this
Let
stuff?
her fly from the tree stand, man. A long time ago, Mark and Dad, they used to be into, can't let your scent get out and all that good stuff. And somewhere along the line, they decided that it really didn't matter. And they just, started going right there from the side of the tree, and it hadn't affected their hunting one bit. I figured, hey, if these guys are successful at it, well, I might as well follow suit.
Nice. What about you, Dan?
Oh, I'm too lazy to get down out of a tree stand. So I got bad knees, so I let her fly.
Yep. I'm right there with you guys too. I remember I was convinced when there was a big study that Deer and Deer Hunting magazine put out probably 5 years ago, where they tested scrapes, where they put deer urine, they put some other random odors, they put human urine and a few other things, and then they recorded with trail cameras and other observations how deer reacted to it. And deer did not react negatively at all to human urine. So from that point on, I let her rip. So
yeah, that's I don't think it's any different than any other animal, relieving themselves in the outdoors. So I don't think it affects them.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that this is the case, because back when I was a kid and I had to use a bottle, that was kind of a pain in the butt. So this is the way to go.
Right. I don't clean my truck out a lot. So I remember one hunting season, I peed in a bottle, left my pack in the back of the truck.
Oh,
and
no.
Cleaned it out maybe 3 months later. Yeah, I'm not doing that again.
There's a story, and I may get in trouble for telling this. There's a story that goes back. This is a long time ago. Mark and Dad, when they actually, because for the longest time they hunted together, right. And they would film each other, and so every other day was Hunter. Mark may be the hunter one day, Terry the hunter. The hunter the next day, and they'd switch off and on. To be fair. And one day, I think Mark threw down, they'd always throw down their packs. They always had this, like a fanny pack that had all their gear and, all the calls and binoculars and all that stuff, they'd have packed in their, rattling antlers. And at the end of the hunt, of course, when you go up, you got it on. At the end of the hunt, a lot of times they'd just throw it down and, one less thing to climb down with. And apparently Mark had his pea bottle in it, and he threw it down, and it exploded everywhere. So he forgot he had it in there. So.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's no good. That's
well,
awesome.
we better start talking about whitetails or something.
Yeah, we always get off on a tangent here in the beginning. But okay, so with that out of the way, you grew up in a family of, from the outside in, we'd look at it as a family of whitetail royalty. Terry Drury is your dad and Mark as your uncle. It seems like you grew up with some interesting things happening around you and a lot of whitetail hunting. So I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up with Terry as your dad. What was that like, and was there a lot of pressure to get into whitetail hunting or to do this all the time? How did that go?
Yeah, it was interesting because when I was growing up, they were just starting the company. I think they started filming in '88, and I was born in '81, so I was pretty young still. And before they started doing it for a profession, they hunted at a local little club that was called the 40 Acre Club. You had to have 40 acres to be a part of the club. And, so a lot of my youngest memories are from over at the 40 Acre Club, and going over there with Dad, and, he'd always stop and say, hey, do you remember what field we're in now? Where are we at now? What's this field? This is Bruce's Cave. This is, the old milk truck, blah, blah, blah. And so those are my youngest memories. And, when they started filming and all that stuff, a lot of times I remember just being with Dad when they were filming the interviews and kind of the spine takes and all that stuff that would go in between the hunts. I was just around because they filmed a lot of that there in Bloomsdale, Missouri at the 40 Acre Club.
Okay.
And as time evolved, they started hunting more. I think, it started out, they were hunting turkeys is how we started. And, so they would hunt, locally, but they would hunt down in the Ozarks a lot. And, I really was never on their trips with them because I was just too young at the time. And, as I got a little older, it kind of coincided when they were starting to get into the deer side of it. I think '93 they released their first title. I think it was Monster Bucks. It was before, I think they had Monster Bucks 1 and Monster Bucks 2, and then I believe Realtree took it over from there. But, at that time I think they started hunting like Illinois, Iowa, started knocking on doors. And this was before all that stuff was really, very big. In the early 90s was kind of the beginning of the industry, late 80s, early 90s was really the beginning of our industry.
Right.
It's not a very old industry. So, growing up, honestly, Dad would be gone a lot. I mean, he was just gone a lot during the hunting season. So when he was home, I got my hunter's safety course done and all that good stuff. And I can't remember how old I was when I started hunting, but it might have been, whatever the legal age, in Missouri at the time. And maybe it was, I don't know, 11, 12. I really can't remember how old I was, but we'd hunt behind the house. Dad and Mom owned 24 acres there. And, I had bugged him so often to build like a tree house in the backyard, and so what he did is he actually, and he comes from a construction background. That's what he does today still. He's got a degree in civil engineering, and he has a construction company. So we went back there and we started building a tree house. Well, really it was technically probably our first box blind. And, and he built it just far enough into the woods where he cut out a hole. It was funny because it had 3 walls to it and there was an open end. Well, I always got stuck sitting on that open end where the air would whip through, and he always tucked back in the corner of the 3 walls. And he cut himself out a hole that was just big enough to put his binoculars in and see up at the house and see if Mom was making us breakfast or not. And this was before cell phones and stuff, so it was the binoculars told us, okay, she's making breakfast, let's get down. And and back in those days, there wasn't, in our hometown, there just wasn't a lot of deer. And I think they had got hit with blue tongue in the 80s or something like that. And they just didn't have a big deer population. So we saw a deer, 2 deer, 3 deer. That was a big day, So we'd sit out there and we'd have a good time. And it was more about, really, it was honestly more about making the memories together, because we'd get out and go get breakfast early. You know, it'd be like 7 a.m. It's like, all right, let's get down. You know, we weren't hunting too hard. And it was a little while till I actually started going on trips with him, and you know, getting to hunt at other places. So it took a long time till I actually killed my first deer. I think I was 15 years old. I had hunted for like 5 or 6 years, you know, until I killed my first deer. So not for lack of trying. Once we started going on those trips out of town, we just never had, it was weird. We just never had any luck. It was always mishaps. It was, the camera always saved the deer's life. And getting back to your question about if there was ever any pressure, you know, the camera was a weird thing, because I still to this day have never hunted without a camera guy with me. And of course, when I was growing up, Dad was the camera guy growing up, you know, and they were trying to make a living and a business out of it. So you didn't do anything as it pertained to hunting. You didn't do anything that wasn't on camera. I mean, if we were sighting in a gun, if we were anything, there was a camera present. And so, you know, at the time it was tough. That was tough growing up, kind of with those expectations. And, you know, as a kid and you're going through puberty and all that stuff, it's the last thing you want to do is have a camera stuck in your face. And, you know, we see it to this day. A lot of the guys on our team, when they film their kids, there's not many of them that are very comfortable on camera. And it always takes me back, because I know exactly the feeling. And, you know, it was tough going, you know, hunting in that environment, because I knew, you know, there was kind of an obligation there. I didn't really know any different. I didn't know I still don't know what hunting is like by myself. I just have never done it, because it, you know, at the end of the day, it would never serve the purpose for me to just go out and hunt alone. You know, that's not what we're here to do. You know,
right.
So it's weird growing up like that. I have two kind of unique views on what hunting and hunting heritage is. You know, I think your average guy would be like, man, I would not want to grow up like that. I like the serenity of the outdoors and to be by myself, and that's kind of how I center myself. But, you know, I look at it as if, you know, when I go out there, even to this day, you know, Dad and I will hunt occasionally together. I'm always at his place, but, you know, usually he's got a camera guy and I got a camera guy, and we're in different sets. But I like going with another guy. It's fun. You know, you get to cut up. You know, when you hunt as much as we do, it can get so slow, and, you know, there's a lot of times where you're just grinding it out, and you know, having another guy there with you in the tree, it kind of freshens it up, and you know, it's somebody to talk to, and you're BSing, and, you know, it's kind of like being back at camp when you got a bunch of guys. Well, that's kind of the same mentality. It's, you know, you're talking about stuff guys talk about, you know, you're having a good time. So it kind of keeps things moving throughout the day, and you need that. So
I
don't know. It's you know, it was good to grow up that way. I learned a lot about the business and didn't even know it, but it also probably skewed the way I view hunting a little bit, I'd say.
Yeah, I can imagine. But to your point about, you know, there being some fun having someone else in the tree, I started hunting, you know, with my dad, and then moved on to hunting by myself. And then, you know, when I've come back to the point now where I've experienced now hunting with a cameraman, there's definitely pros and cons to both that I found for me. But there's a lot of fun, you know, having someone else in the tree. You can share that experience with you and talk about it and reminisce on it. And you know, I've also found it to be a lot of fun switching roles and just being the cameraman. That's a lot more fun than I thought. Yeah.
And that's how I started here at Drury Outdoors. I mean, I went to college and got a degree in production, and honestly, not with the intentions of working for these guys. I just, you know, it's kind of what I went to college and started with kind of in the graphic design field, and, you know, kind of started feeling out what I like to do, and I was best at production. And I didn't realize it, but Dad had pretty much set me on my path from an early age, and I didn't know it. And, you know, when I was in college, I started interning for them, you know, during spring break, winter break, summer break, and, you know, learned a lot here at the studio. I'd get back to school and I'd be steps ahead of the guys in class just because I was doing it in the real world, you know, so to speak. So it really set me towards my path in life. And when Mark, he offered me a job my last semester I came home for a break and was working for him, and he had offered me a position and with modest pay, and I started editing for them, but I also started going on trips with Mark and whoever and filming as well. I was a camera guy, so I learned a lot. There really isn't any facet of our company that I haven't done in one way or the other at some point. And I've been here 10 years, since I graduated college. So.
Wow. Yeah, sounds like some interesting experiences for sure. So taking a quick step back, you mentioned a little bit about the spots you were hunting when you were growing up, and I think people are always interested to hear a little bit more about the setup. We see the DVDs and the TV shows, and we see a lot of great deer that you guys are killing. But I'm curious, what is the farm setup? Is this land that all that your uncle and your dad own that they're hunting, or are these leases, or do they hunt anywhere by permission? What's the kind of setup there between, I think it's Missouri and Iowa, where you guys seem to hunt the most?
And Illinois, yeah, those three states are the primary states. Initially, it was all leases. It was all knocking on doors. It was helping farmers out. And I'm talking throughout the whole 90s. Mm-hmm. And what would happen is they started losing leases and started losing their position spots to guys coming in and leasing them and basically buying out the lease for more money. And, after you cultivated a spot, everybody can relate to this for the most part. After you cultivated a spot of your own for a year or two, and then you lose the lease, it starts kind of getting to you. So they really identified their, probably I'd say it's probably mid to late 90s, they needed to find a spot of their own. And I believe Dad was the first to purchase a farm. I believe he purchased a place over in Pike County, and, something they can control. I think it was maybe a couple 100 acres, and it was their first piece of property. And, they hunted there for a long time in Pike. And, at that time, I think, and they could speak to this way better than I can because, I was still pretty young. But I think it got to a point where it was getting like so many outfitters and Pike County became such a hot spot that they were feeling a lot of pressures on their fence lines, from trespassers, everything you could think of. And it's, like I said, stuff that everybody deals with.
Yeah.
And I think at some point there, somewhere around the late 90s, I think Mark bought and moved to Iowa. I don't know, it might have been 97, 98, somewhere in there, and bought his first farm and moved to Iowa. And I think that's what changed a lot for those guys. I think Dad sold his place in Illinois somewhere around 2003, 2004, and he bought a bigger chunk there in Missouri, in North Missouri, near Kirksville. And, I think the misconception out there is we only started on television around 2003. So people saw it from that point on, and they're like, oh, these guys got their own farms, and they do, they don't do it like the average Joe, but it stemmed from them doing it like everybody else out there, and as since this is a business to us as well, they got smart about it. They're like, we got to get our own spot, and we got to be able to control our own chunk of ground if we're going to be successful in this and try to manage our properties. And when you're trying to do it consistently, like they've done it for so long, you want to manage it the way you want to manage it, and so they've worked very hard to get to the point they are today, but it did not start that way. They started out knocking on doors and getting leases and people buying leases out from underneath them, and, just like your average guy out there deals with today. So, at this point, this is our 25th year in the business, and I think they've gotten to a point where they know what ground looks good. They've been lucky in the fact that they've bought some pieces and been able to sell them and get a really good return on their investment and help them buy bigger pieces. But I think that's your basic American dream out there, is start small and keep buying a little bit bigger spot and sell right. Get to where you want to be. So that's where they're at today. The farms they own, we do have a couple leases, but the majority of the property they're hunting are places that they own. Some big, some small. Dad's got 60 acres in Illinois, and that's all we got there. We've leased some ground here in the last few years, but we got 60 acres there, and every year we take a good quality mature buck off of it, and I think that's what everybody's looking to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. You gotta start somewhere. So it's interesting to hear though about that transition where where they started from to where they are now, and now we're seeing your family reaping the benefits of that whole process. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, I can't take anything out of that. I'm very lucky, and I understand that. And I think Taylor does too with Mark. I mean, we're lucky in the fact that they've worked so hard and done so well up to this point that we do get to hunt their spots, and I don't take it for granted one bit. And I'm still learning as I go. I'm still learning a lot as I go. Actually, every year I'm screwing up hunts and figuring it out and trying to figure out all the stuff that they learned 20 years ago. I'm just now learning. So, we're lucky in the spots that we get to hunt, but we're still learning how to hunt like everybody else.
Definitely.
All right, I got a quick question for you, Matt. I'm going to switch it up just a little bit. As far as killing or your harvest success every year, have there ever been a year where, obviously a guy watches the shows or he watches the DVDs and he's seeing giant bucks hit the ground. Have you guys ever had a bad year or, oh my gosh, it's late season, the deer aren't moving, nobody's killed. I understand you guys have a big empire with, several hunters, lots and lots of hunters hunting for you guys, but we'll stick with Mark and Terry. Have they ever been in a situation where it's like, man, I haven't killed yet?
Yeah, I think last year was our toughest season as a company in a long time. I think if you're looking at a bell curve, I think 2008 was probably 2007, somewhere in there. Those were our best years as a company. And then, last 2 years, we as everybody has, or a lot of people, I should say, EHD's been really, really tough on the farms in the last few years. So last year was probably our toughest. Now, Dad, I think his record's something like going 60, and they hunt every day. So that's the part, it's a job for them. So they are hunting every day once the season starts. And I think Dad went 60 or 61 days one year before he killed his first, and of course they're passing some deer, 3-year-old, 2-year-old type deer, and they're looking for that 4 or 5-year-old or older deer. So it's you kind of take it with a grain of salt when you hear that, because they've had opportunities, but to manage the places that they're managing, they're managing for the upper. It's not necessarily about rack. It's more about age class. And so Dad went like 60-something days. Well, this last year, I think he went 58 days. So until he killed his first deer. And I think it was like, probably a 4 or 5-year-old deer that was maybe in the mid-30s, 130s. It was a grind this year. Mark, he came out of the gate pretty hot in October. Early on in October, he killed a gross boon. Yeah. On his place in Iowa, but after that, I think it started grinding a little bit for him, and last year as a whole, as a team, it was our toughest year in a long, long time. But by and large, we still had some success, and we're still fortunate.
Interesting. Yeah, I just my opinion, but maybe it was a blessing in disguise for you guys last year, because I think, even though maybe there weren't quite as many kills in the past, I thought you guys had some of the best storylines and, stuff that kind of led into those kills than maybe any other year that I've seen your DVDs. So I really enjoyed them this year.
Yeah, it's probably a double-edged sword, really. I mean, when you have a lot of kills, you're wanting to put a lot of content on the DVDs. And when you're not having as many as a company, I think it forces you. We always produce really good storylines, but what happens is in the edit process, a lot of times we shorten or cut a lot of stuff out because you're trying to add more kills. It's a weird thing because it's like, well, what does the viewer want? Does he want, and some of our competitors out there might put 30 kills on a DVD, but, we've also heard from, our fan base that they don't necessarily like that because they want to get involved in the storyline. How did you, where'd you hang? Why'd you hang there? What'd you plant there? What, the information behind it. And that's kind of always been the key to, I think, Mark and Dad's success is it's not some secret. They've tried helping the viewer and kind of teaching, our successes and our mistakes, our failures. They let it all out there. And I think in a slow year, you could probably let those storylines breathe a little bit more, and you can kind of dive into them a little bit more than in a year where you killed, say you want to put 20 kills on a DVD, and you're trying to get through them a little bit quicker. So it's interesting. In a slow year, you might expand your storylines a little better.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
I think from a business standpoint too, as far as the industry is concerned, I think there is a transition that has either happened or is in the process of happening to where the people or the quote unquote fan base is not as interested in a majority of kills anymore, because I'm seeing a lot of that change going to a storyline instead of just, hey, I'm here comes a buck, shoot it, trophy picture. So I'm seeing.
Well, absolutely. Think about it. If you turn on, there's more or less three major networks you can turn on at any given time, and more or less probably see like a 150-inch deer hit the dirt. And so what separates the men from the boys as far as content goes? What separates it is storylines. What separates it is guys who do it themselves for the most part. What separates it is, sweat equity, showing that you are, yes, we may be hunting more, bigger tracts of land or premier places, but at the end of the day, they're still showcasing tips and tactics on how you at home can also, take your 40 acres, take your 80 acres, 120 acres, whatever it may be, your lease, and do small things, relative to what your tract of land is, and improve it. Because at the end of the day, I think Mark and Dad, and we got this from Bobby Cole, this term, but they're gamekeepers. They're managing their overall habitat. They're planting trees. They're, planting the right food. They're, doing timber cuts if they need to, improve the forest floor. It's just, there's a lot that you can do. And I think that's the kind of stuff that a producer needs to dive in to be successful. I think you're exactly right. I don't think your average viewer anymore just wants to see a bunch of kills. I think they want to see how you killed it. Like what'd you do to be successful there, so they can, take something and use it on their own piece of land. So that's what we try to do, and hopefully that's what people take away.
Yeah, for sure. That's a perfect segue for the next thing I wanted to ask you about. Obviously your dad, Mark, and the whole team have had a lot of success over the years, and you've kind of touched on a few of the things, but I'm curious, if you had to pick maybe one thing, what do you think is the biggest key to their success, killing mature deer? That's a good question. From my perspective, from where I sit and how I see them work day in and day out, it's their uncanny business decisions that help them be successful in anything they do. Honestly, it's really a pleasure to get to watch them from the business side of it. Because Mark and Dad, believe me, they are two completely different people. But between the two of them, I mean, it's yin and yang. It's really interesting. But between the two of them, there's nothing that they don't think of, very little. And I'm not trying to be like braggadocious about it. It's just interesting to watch them. If one guy has an opinion about something as it pertains to the farms or a tree or a funnel or this deer sign or whatever the case may be, they're very, in their own unique ways, they always get to the same end goal, basically. I think Mark, his most successful attribute is his aggressiveness.
He's much more aggressive than Dad is. I mean, if he has a deer in his sights, he scouts it. He's just we call him the mad scientist at figuring a way, to get on that deer. And I think that's his most successful attribute. But as a whole, I'd say their business prowess. It's really interesting to see them work and come to the same general end result in much different ways.
Yeah, it definitely seems like they're maybe analytical in how they approach the hunt and how they break everything down and process things and make strategic decisions. And something you said there, I'd like to dive into it a little bit more. Could you tell us a little bit more about, in what ways Mark is, maybe better in certain ways? It sounds like he's aggressive, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about how Mark is different, and then how your dad, what's what's Terry's pros, what's his cons versus his brother? What's that look like?
Well, I think Terry's pros is he will sit and he will wait something out. I mean, I think it's a stubborn quality more than anything. And, like that 60, me saying you hunted 60 days and this year 58 days, it seems like that's every year for him. I mean, sometimes he'll kill one right out of the gate, but it's few and far between. And he's hunting a much different piece than Mark is, and it's different deer on different dirt, It's interesting because Dad's patience, and I call it stubbornness, but it's really patience. He'll sit in a stand all day and not think twice, and he will literally stand up the entire day. He'll wear a camera guy out every year. He just it's a grinder mentality, and I think that's his biggest pro. And that grinder mentality, he will always get the job done. Mark's biggest pro is definitely his aggressiveness. They're both very analytical in different ways, but they're both very analytical. I think, Mark will take something like 500,000 trail cam pics, between all the places he hunts. And I think Dad will take something like 300,000 Reconyx pics. It's really, they go to bed at night looking at their Reconyx pictures every night. Like if you go to their place to hunt with them, and you're at their house or whatever, it's so boring because they're not talking. I mean, they're sitting on their laptop and they're literally looking at pictures every night. So, Mark, he had a deer a couple of years ago, and I mean, he had hunted this thing for several years. I mean, he's going as far as he's got his topo map out, and he's mapping exactly where his Reconyx pictures were dating back years and years, and what times and what the winds were and what the moon phase was. I mean, they really dive into it to a whole nother level. And I think that's what differentiates guys like them and Jay Gregory and the Kiskis of the world. Lee Lukoski is one of those guys. Like, they take it to almost an obsessive level. And they, I think guys knock them a lot of times and say, oh, they've all, they kill big deer. Or if I hunted those places, I could too. I don't think that's the case. I think it's because the mentality they take into the hunt is why they kill those deer. I mean, just because you have one patterned doesn't mean it's going to walk in front of you. And especially when you got two guys in the stand with you, there's a lot of things, a lot of variables that go wrong. There's a lot that have to go right to be successful on a hunt. So I think that persistence, is really a key for them.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. I got one more Mark versus Terry question, and then we'll move on. What about this situation? Let's say you're being dropped off on a random piece of private ground somewhere in the Midwest. Let's say it's 150 acres. You're there for 7 days, and you're told, all right, you need to learn this property and hunt it for 7 days, and your goal is to kill a mature deer. And you get to either have your dad or your Uncle Mark join you as your advisor, but you can only have one or the other. Who are you going to pick to help you with that 7-day mission?
It'd be Mark because of his aggressiveness. It might take Dad 27 days. It'd take Mark 7 days. They both get the job done. You know what I mean? But it's a different way to get the job done. And so if I had 7 days, I'd pick Mark, and I think Dad would pick Mark in 7 days. You know what I mean? He's really, really aggressive. They both have a really uncanny eye to go look at a piece of ground, look at a map, and say, well, here's where the funnel is, here's where the deer are moving, and go in and hang and hunt the same day. I mean, they don't do it as much anymore because their properties, you know, they spend all year manicuring these things and all the off seasons looking at where to hang. But if you had 7 days, you know, I'd say probably Mark, and they both could get it done, but I'd say Mark is your better bet.
Okay, makes sense. So, speaking of their properties and the work they do there, you know, given the, you know, how everybody was hit so hard with EHG over the past couple of years, you know, how are you guys adapting your strategies on these properties, or, you know, how you're managing them, you know, to account for that impact on the population?
Well, I think Mark got hit a little harder than Dad's place did, and he got hit 2 years in a row. I mean, Mark estimates in some cases he lost 70-80% of his upper end, you know, bucks out of his population. That's pretty devastating. I mean, yeah, you had that thing, you know, it was a well-oiled machine, and you know, it was almost sickening how many big deer he had there, and it was really sickening to see how many they found dead. Jeez. And you know, I heard him say something the other day I thought was interesting because, you know, they still go in and manage. So if your main goal is to have a balanced deer herd, you know, a 1-to-1 or even a 1-to-2 buck to doe ratio, it's a hard mentality to put in your head. Okay, I need to go in and manage my does when you know you lost so many deer. But what happened at Mark's place, and I think what happened to a lot of people with EHD, it hit more of the bucks than it did the does. So now where he had more, kind of a balanced herd, it's kind of really out of whack now. So, you know, there's a lot of does on it. And I think some people would probably struggle. Who knows if they're right or wrong? This is to each their own kind of thing. But in their mind, they have some management of the does to do to kind of get the balance back in the herd. Because, you know, if you start getting more does than you do bucks, then you have issues with your rut. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff there's kind of a waterfall effect that happens.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, so I think, you know, they're trying to make sure their habitat's good. They're planting a lot of food. I know in Missouri on their Missouri places, they're feeding a new product that we teamed up with this year, a supplement product called Drury Outdoors. And these guys, it's a really cool story to tell, and I think you're going to start hearing more and more about it coming this, you know, the next few weeks once the shows start airing. You'll see commercials for these guys, but they come from a background, really interesting. They come from a background of like cattle, like, you know, poultry, pork, beef. Those industries, they're veterinarians, they're scientists, they're biologists, and they come up with, you know, immunizations or whatever. If there's a disease that crops up in some of those industries, they basically come up with the cures for them. And they're hunters. A lot of these guys are hunters. The owners and a lot of the guys that work there are hunters. So they got hit with the EHD as well, and so they started just from their own standpoint trying to figure out it's not really a cure, and you're not going to cure EHD, but it's like a total herd health kind of management. So it's trying to make sure you have a healthy herd. And so they got this, you know, they call it their special sauce or whatever, this special thing that they've created, and they've done it in supplement farm. They've done it in like concentrated farm. And we started using the product here in the off season, and we're going to see what it does. We're really excited about it. We sat through the meetings and heard the biologists talk about it and the science behind it. And so we're feeding our herds, you know, in the states where it's legal. We're putting that stuff out right now, and we're really trying to make our deer more healthy. It's almost like giving them vitamins, you know, and it's a supplement. And so right now we're doing that kind of stuff. We're planting the food plots, you know, planting the corn, the beans, all the stuff we always do. But, you know, we're trying to do it to the next level and make sure we get these deer, get their health up. Because I think that's the biggest issue. The deer that did survive EHD, if it was in your area, their health may be diminished as well. And then we had the really harsh winter, and that hurts them. You know, so it's like they're going into this spring, and they're already at a disadvantage. And if you're trying to manage your deer for, you know, to optimize their racks, you know, if you go beyond just overall herd health and you're trying to get to the point where you're optimizing rack growth, well, heck, they're using up all of their strength to just build their body fats back up. So you have to get through that as well. So I think everybody's, trying to figure out how to get their deer back to that healthy point. But I think you're certainly, if you're feeding them supplements right now where you can in the states where it's legal, it certainly helps.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of deer are struggling coming off this winter, so anything you can do to help certainly is a good thing. So that said, I think I wanted to move on to talk a little bit about what it's like filming and producing shows and DVDs like this. But Dan, before we transition over to that side of things, is there anything else you want to cover?
Oh boy, this is embarrassing because I just forgot my question. This is a first, and I do apologize.
Want us to come back to you?
Yeah, just come back to me.
All right, we can do that.
I'm an idiot.
Well, Matt, that said then, if I'm right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys produce 4 different TV shows and 3 or 4 DVDs a year. Is that right?
That is correct. 4 TV shows on 2 different networks and a line of 3 DVDs that we put out in the Cabela's of the world.
Okay. So, from your side of things, and I think, like you mentioned, you've done some editing, you've done some filming. I think you do a lot of the production now. What's the greatest challenge of making all of this work and come together?
I think the biggest challenge is to keep it unique. So when you have that many productions, you don't want it to seem like if you turn the channel and you check out Natural Barn, Winchester and Drury's Natural Barn over on Pursuit. And we have a cast of guys over there, and we have a certain kind of edit style for that show. And then if you switch it over to Outdoor Channel and you tune in to Bow Madness, okay, how's that show different from the others? So that's the biggest challenge. And then the next biggest challenge is to keep it fresh and unique every year, because you can't, especially in our position, you can't sit back on your accolades. You got to keep innovating. You got to keep trying something new. You got to keep making sure your production levels at the top of your game. I mean, there's a lot of really good producers out there. The Kiefer brothers, at Rusted Rooster, Jason Brown. Yep. Those guys are phenomenal. Dropped. I love that show. And there's a lot of good shows out there. But, to keep it fresh and to keep your content unique, that's a challenge. And all the producers ultimately are trying to do that same thing. So if you think about it and you're constantly trying to one-up each other, it makes the production better as a whole, but it's a challenge year in and year out. And when you have this many productions, especially, to keep coming up with new stuff. So that's the biggest challenge, I'd say.
To piggyback off Mark's question real quick, I would say that you guys have what some would call a dream job. Okay. Now we get to see, for people who may not be in the industry, I guess I would consider myself not in it, but I'm familiar with it. And I know how much hours of filming go into a 30-minute show or a 2-hour DVD. But what is the crappiest part about your job? Because everybody can complain about something. What's part of your job that you don't like?
Man, that's tough. I enjoy a lot of the aspects for sure. I think one of the toughest parts would be probably cutting down a show. One of the crappiest parts is cutting down a show, because really at the end of the day, when you get all the plugs and take care of all your sponsors and your partners, there might be 14 to 16, 18 minutes tops of actual hunting content. Or geez, I mean, if you think about it, so we got a new show coming out called 13. It comes out on the Outdoor Channel July 1st. The cast is comprised of Mark, Terry, myself, Taylor, and Jim Tomey and Gary LeBox. And say you get to like November, where all of us are out and hunting, and we broke the show down to different phases of the deer season. So you might have a phase that's, say it's around the Missouri gun season. and the phase is like a week long. So you got one episode consists of, 6 guys who are out there filming for a week straight and every day, and, cutting a lot of good stuff out. It might even be good encounters, but cutting it out because, we decided, hey, say Terry killed a deer, on day 6, and you want to give it a good 2 segments worth of time on TV. Well, you're going to you might cut out Jim, Taylor, and Matt because, what we encountered just wasn't as interesting as what Gary and Mark encountered. You know what I mean? And these are just examples.
Right.
It gets very sticky on cutting shows down. And Dream Season is probably the worst of all of them. 13's we're finding out is pretty similar because there's so many guys in the cast. But Dream Season, man, you might have 300, 400 hours of footage for 13 episodes, and they're called half-hour episodes, but in reality, you might have 14 to 16 minutes of hunting. Think of that. Think of how much you're cutting. And there's a lot of interesting stuff. I know the producers for us are jury team members, and even Mark and Terry, you get discouraged a little bit because you produce your butt off out in the field, and then you see the episode, and there's so much that gets cut out. And, guys, out there watching think, oh, every time you turn around, a deer's coming in. Geez, I wish it was that way because my wife would be a lot happier. I'd be home more. It'd go quicker, but it really isn't the reality. I mean, they're just out there every day nonstop.
Yep. Yeah, I think both me and Dan, given our work filming and on that end of things on a much smaller scale, we can definitely relate. So speaking of your new show, 13, could you tell us a little bit more about, what's different about this show? Why should folks be excited to be checking that out in the Outdoor Channel here soon?
Yeah, we're really pumped up about it. This past fall, we teamed up with Under Armour and started hunting in all UA gear. So that was a big switch for us, as most people know. And with that, it gave us the ability to produce a new television show. So the show, as we sat down and we looked at the landscape of television, there's a lot of what we call filler out there. And it's basically just shows that you kind of just turn on and it's on and you're watching it, it's in the background or whatever. You're not really learning anything. You're not taking anything away from it. I don't know. It's kind of getting stale a little bit, the message that's getting sent out there from the producers. So, we looked and said, how can we be different? What can make, even from our stuff, how can we make it different? So we sat down. It was Mark, Terry, and myself. And I had a laptop there, and we started, brainstorming, throwing out ideas, throwing out stuff that we felt like in our previous TV shows, stuff that we liked, stuff that we didn't like. We identified a lot of stuff out of King of the Spring, which we produced a season of for the Outdoor Channel, that we really liked production-wise. So it's like, okay, let's cherry pick all the good things that we like. And, okay, how do you wrap that into this deer season? What do we do different about this deer season? Mark and Terry hunt every day for 4 months. How can we kind of package that up? So they sat down, and Mark and Terry kind of started saying, okay, the deer kind of have different phases in all reality. Like, what's it take to produce 13 episodes of deer hunting? Well, in all reality, the deer have a lot of different phases during the season that they go through. Things that light switch events that make them move, that shut them down, that, whatever the case may be.
Sure.
So we just started listing them, literally sat there, and I started typing out as they were talking. And we started September 15th for us in Missouri, which is where we can start, and started September 15th, and they said, well, in the previous 40 years of hunting, 30 years of hunting, whatever the case may be, between the two of them, here's what I've noticed happens. And it was really interesting. I should have rolled a camera during this process because it was so neat to listen to Mark and Dad talk about it, and they were so on the same page. And one guy might be like, well, yeah, you know what? I also noticed that deer do this during this phase. And the other guy would be like, you know what? You're dead on. They definitely do that. And so we came up with a phase, So we'd come up with another phase and another phase. And by the time we got to the end of, middle of January or whenever the season ends, Mark looked up at me and said, how many phases did we come up with here? And so I looked through, I started counting them. I was like, we came up with 13, believe it or not. So it was kind of a lucky thing that idea landed into, we got a phase for every episode. And it wasn't designed that way. I mean, they literally just started talking about, it was date driven. Okay, September 15th through the 24th, the deer does this. The 25th through the, October or whatever, the deer does this. And by the end of it, they came up with 13 phases. So in the show, we really dive into, and I say we, it's not Taylor, it's not me in this part, it's Mark and Terry. It's the guys that have lived and breathed it every single day for the last 25 years, and they hunted, 15 to 20 years before that. It's their knowledge, it's their mess ups, it's all that stuff. It's that information that really is priceless, and I'd have to hunt 4 more decades before I could even be close to knowing what they know. And so it's that information that they're spitting out. But then the next part of it is we broke it into 4 tactics of how to actually kill the deer during that phase. We don't always succeed, as far as a cast member doesn't always succeed. It might be one of the Drury Outdoors team members that we kind of bring in or introduce one of their hunts. But okay, it's great. A deer is doing this during this phase. Well, how do I kill one? How does that help me kill one? Well, we try to break it down even further and give you the how to kill one. So it's pretty interesting in that fact. I don't know that you see that on TV very much. I don't know that you see producers really trying to teach a guy in every part of the season how to kill a deer. It's just, I killed a deer. So I think from that standpoint, people will be able to learn a lot or take something away from it, maybe learn something from something we messed up. That's part of it too. Failures, misses, that kind of stuff. So hunting the wrong spot at the wrong time. I mean, they get into barometric pressure. They get into moon phase, funnel, sign, food. They really cover every aspect. And then it's in an infotainment kind of way, information with entertainment mixed in. So I think from the entertainment side, we try to, everybody always says, oh man, Mother Nature killed me today. Mother Nature, she really screwed up my hunt. You hear people talk about Mother Nature constantly, and nobody's ever kind of brought that out in television. So from the entertainment side of it, I think that's what we try to do a little bit different. It's not a cheesy way. It's real light, but quote unquote Mother Nature, we found a VO person that we felt like kind of in our mind, if you think about what Mother Nature would be sounding like, this is it, this is the voice. We found what we felt like was a voice, and she is kind of the voiceover, the narrator, so to speak, that kind of leads you through the season. And, I so far from the stuff that we put out there, our trailer or teaser trailer, most guys have really been into it, really thought that it's a cool idea. Some guys thought that it might get a little cheesy. I think the litmus test is going to be once we see what everybody thinks of this season. But, with anything we do, we're not trying to make it cheesy. I think there's a real fine line that you can cross. And I think we dialed it back enough to where it's not a big presence. It's just kind of to help you move along through the season. And, we're referencing her, in the stand and that kind of stuff. It's not cheesy. It's just kind of a fun way to package the show together. So I think people are going to get into it. And at the end of the day, I think people can learn a lot from our mistakes and our successes.
Kind of like a Discovery Channel Planet Earth, if you've ever seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That show is awesome, by the way.
It is.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. I'm excited to check it out. And, I can never get enough. Of all the people on TV, like you said, there's a lot of good shows out there. Then there's a lot of filler shows and some that I don't know how they made it on TV. But, I've always enjoyed the Drury productions because I could just listen to Mark and your dad talk, for hours. They've just seemed to be a wealth of knowledge. They're interesting, and they obviously know what they're doing. And even though, they're hunting different kinds of properties than I have in different situations, I always find something that I can learn from them and apply back to my own piece of ground, and the own how I hunt too. So I'm excited to hear more from them and see what 13 has in store.
I think you'll like it. Like I said, it starts airing on the Outdoor Channel the week of July 1st. I think July 1st is a Tuesday, and it airs in Wildlife Obsession's old time slot. Wildlife Obsession went away, and this is taking its spot. So 9 p.m. Central on Tuesday nights, and has a couple other air times. But set your DVRs. I think it's going to be something that people really can sink their teeth in and learn something. And like you said, even if it's just taking one small piece of information to take back with you and implement in your own place, that's all we're trying to do. Mark and Terry, they've said 1,000 times, they're not very funny. They're not pretty. We don't have a shtick. What we have going for us is the fact that they've sat in a tree for every day, for 25 years during the season. So, you can't help but pick some stuff up and learn some things and see what the deer, what their habits are and what they're doing. And, because they're so analytical, I think they've just picked up a lot of stuff along the way. So by no means are we saying that we're the ultimate authority. And, we realize that our stuff is very Midwest driven. So the guys in the South and the guys in the Northeast or the West, it may not apply phase-wise exactly to what we're doing, but I think you could still take something away and apply it to your own place.
Oh, yeah. I think that's absolutely true. And I think with that being the case, we're actually running up on time here. That said, Dan, did you have anything else you wanted to ask Matt before we kind of wrap things up?
I think with technology today and the camera equipment that's available, that's all for, it's pretty cheap. So people can tell their stories online or even put together a DVD if they want. What suggestions or advice would you give someone who wants to start filming their hunts or, maybe put together a blog or an online show or a DVD even?
I think the biggest thing is to be authentic. Don't be fake. You don't have to wear face paint. You don't have to, if that's your thing, go for it. But you don't have to, it doesn't, I don't know, man. I mean, we're partnered with some great people, some great sponsors, but, if you're just starting out, you can start small. You don't have to dive right in and get everything, you can start small and figure out what fits you, what's good for you, what equipment you like. Go to a local archery shop. And, even by doing that, local archery shops, a lot of times will push a product that they may be paid to push or, do research. That's the beauty of technology. Back to what you were saying, technology, you can just about find out anything you want on any product by Googling it, by doing some review searches, by looking at places like Wired to Hunt. There's all kinds of information on that website. So I think if I was a new hunter coming up and trying to figure out how to go about it, what to do, I'd go online, I'd find out as much info as I could. I'd watch some TV shows and I'd be careful of what shows to watch. I'm not knocking anybody, but I think as a producer, we always take it very seriously to try to show how to hunt the right way, how to hunt ethically, respect your neighbors, respect nature, quartering away angles, broadside angles. Don't take quartering two shots if you're, hunting with archery equipment. It's just stuff like that. I think you got to be careful of who you're emulating, so it's, that's probably the best advice I can give. And like you said, you can do it pretty cheap. Get a GoPro, get a little HD palm camera and get a buddy and go out and film together.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people are starting. And like you said, it's amazing the resources out there today. You can really learn a lot. And, if you have the dream and the passion to do something like that, you can do it. So
you're absolutely right. You hit it well there, because I think a misconception, a lot of young kids nowadays, and I'm not saying that I'm old, I'm 33, but I get a lot of emails. I read every email that comes to our website. all the social media stuff, I read all of it. And a lot of guys think, a lot of young kids think, we just started out and it was like this always. Well, Mark and Terry worked very, very hard to get to this point. So, I think people see Lee and Tiffany and they see Waddell and those guys and think, well, I can do that. Well, all those people worked really, really hard to get there. A lot of these guys have been in the industry the entire history of the industry, so
right.
I think, you got to be careful in thinking that you can go out and want to be on TV and it happen tomorrow. You got to work hard and you got to have a little luck along the way. You got to meet the right people and be authentic.
That's great advice. Awesome advice. Well, that being said then, two things. Number one, we talked about something a little bit before we got in the air, Matt, and we never got to touch on it yet, but I know you guys have recently, in addition to putting out your new DVDs, I think you also have them available now to stream on your website, which I think is pretty cool. Can you tell us really quick a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we're calling it Drury On Demand, DOD. And basic principle here is, with technology, a lot of people, they're not buying DVDs anymore. They want it straight on their phone or their tablet or their computer. And so we teamed up with a company called RLX Media. And they're actually our DVD duplicators. They have been for decades. And they came up with this technology. It's a secure technology, and basically we've put it on our website. So what happens is you go to our website and you go to the Drury On Demand portion in our store, and every DVD we've ever done in the last, since we've been doing DVDs, not VHS, but since we've been doing DVDs, every DVD is available for download. You just go to the store, you click it, you purchase the download, and you'll get an email from us that comes to your inbox, and you click a link, you go download this free RLX player, and what it does is it gives you 3 licenses. It gives you one for your smartphone, it gives you one for your tablet, and one for your computer. And the DVD you bought, it lives on the cloud. And so you can download, you can delete, you can re-download anytime you want. All you got to do is have a really good internet connection. But it allows you to download that straight to whatever device, or all 3 if you wanted, at any given time. You just got to have a good internet connection. And it's such a cool technology. I've been so impressed with the quality of it. It's got all the DVD features. It's got the functionality, the chapter menus, the bonus features, everything the DVD has, all right there at the touch of your fingertips. So if you ever want to watch a DVD from your iPhone in a tree stand, if it's slow, you just pop in your headphones, and you can watch it now. It's a very, very cool technology, and we're going to start pushing it pretty heavy this year. I think people are really, really going to get into it.
That's awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to check it out. I'm heading out to Colorado here pretty soon. I've got a 19-hour drive, so I'm sure I'm going to pull up a DVD or 2 on my phone or iPad and have some enjoyment with that. So very cool.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's just DruryOutdoors.com, and I think people are really going to enjoy it.
Awesome. And so also, if anyone wants to get more information about what you guys are doing, your TV shows, your DVDs, is that the same website that they should go to for more information?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to www.DruryOutdoors.com, all one word, you can hit our Facebook, you can get to Facebook, you can get to our Twitter, you can get to our Instagram, YouTube, any info you want on Drury Outdoors, you can start at DruryOutdoors.com and find it. It's really, we just launched a new website about 3 weeks ago, and it's optimized for mobile or computer. You can check out all the journal entries. So when our team's out there and they're killing deer or killing turkeys or whatever, all those kills go in our journal, and you can follow along with the team and share, your favorite hunt on Facebook or social media and let your friends see it. It's pretty cool.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll be sure to include that link in the show notes so that folks can click over to that and check everything out. And that said, thanks so much, Matt. This has been really interesting, and I think some interesting insight into the business and how you and your family have been so successful. So this has been great. Thank you.
Thank you guys for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, and keep doing what you're doing, man. I think the platform that you give guys, like I said, not just in these podcasts, but the information that you put out in your blogs and and whatever the links, to this product or that product review. I think it's really helpful to the hunter out there, and just keep up the great work.
Hey, I appreciate it. We will do that, and let's be in touch soon.
All right. Talk to you guys soon.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. I thought that was a pretty cool conversation, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here on the Wired to Hunt podcast. So with that said, thank you so much to all of you that joined us here today. As always, if you enjoyed the show, we would definitely appreciate it if you could leave a rating or review on iTunes. And, if you do leave a review and happen to include a recommended random or crazy question for one of our future guests, we might just use it in the show. So there's that. Thank you in advance for taking the time to do that. Speaking of thanks, we'd also like to thank our excellent partners who help make this show possible. So big thanks to Sitka Gear, Bushnell Optics, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Carbon Express Arrows, Lacrosse Boots, Big & J Long Range Attractants, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. That said, be sure to visit wiredtohunt.com/episode 13 to view the show notes from today's episode, and that's where we'll have different links to things we talked about today. And if you're new, definitely head over to the website, wiredhunt.com, to sign up for our Whitetail Fix newsletter. And that's what's going to get you updates on what's new and interesting on the blog. So, thanks again, Wired Hunt Nation. Until next time, have an awesome week. Get outside, keep dreaming about those big whitetails, and stay wired to hunt.